In the long annals of human history, many empires have left an indelible mark both in the popular memory and the historical record. Empires like the Roman Empire, the Mongol Empire, the Chinese dynasties, or the Persian Empire. But for every empire whose name you recognized, many other great empires rose and fell and largely faded from popular memory, and yet in their relative obscurity are still important links in the history of humankind. And one such empire was the Kingdom of Axum, otherwise known as the Empire of Ethiopia, which flourished at the same time as Rome and Byzantium and became an important center of trade between those empires and empires in India, Sri Lanka, and the Far East, and also played an interesting role in the three major monotheistic religions of the Middle East. The Kingdom of Axum deserves to be remembered. The Kingdom of Axum flourished in the 1st century A.D. to about the 7th century. Its center was the city of Axum, located in the highlands of northern Ethiopia. The kingdom had its roots in the so-called Proto-Axumite period, beginning about the 4th century B.C., and became a force to be reckoned with by the 1st century A.D. By that time, it was widely known as an excellent market for ivory, tortoise shells, and rhino horns, as recorded in the Greco-Roman Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a kind of traveler's handbook that covered trading opportunities in the Red Sea and beyond, as far as southwestern India. The kingdom's earliest years are the subject of some scholarly debate, but it is known that the kingdom's written language, Ge'ez, is a member of the Semitic family of languages, mostly centered in the Middle East. Other Semitic languages include Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, and Akkadian. Ge'ez is no longer a spoken language, but it is used widely as the liturgical or holy language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, as well as other Ethiopian and Eritrean churches. The language may have been brought over by southern Arabic people in the 8th century, but some linguistic evidence suggests Semitic languages were spoken in the Horn of Africa for millennia. The value of this early script is significant. The biblical book of Enoch survives as a complete text only in Ge'ez, and Ethiopian translations of the Bible are among the oldest surviving in the world. In its early years, the growing wealth from trade at its port city of Adulis allowed the kingdom to expand its influence over a large part of modern Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, Somalia, and Yemen. The kingdom owes its growth to a shift in global trade patterns. Overland routes to India and other routes became less popular when traders learned that they could take advantage of monsoon winds to cross the Arabian Sea to India. The volume of trade that came through the Red Sea ballooned and brought enormous wealth and prosperity to traders along the route. Axum would become the principal supplier of African goods to Rome. The kingdom subjugated a number of tribes in modern-day Somalia and extended some kind of dominance across the Red Sea over Himyar in modern-day Yemen. Conquered tribes were allowed some autonomy, but were required to pay tribute to Axum, often in the form of heads of cattle, according to Axumite inscriptions. As the kingdom became an empire, the Axumite kings took on the title of Nagusa Nagast, or King of Kings. Whether this reflected a system of sub-kings is not yet clear. By the mid-4th century, Axum was at its height. It was in that century that the kingdom began using the name Ethiopia, according to inscriptions. It was also in that century that Axum played a role in the decline of the once powerful kingdom of Kush. Kush was a Nubian kingdom that had, for a time, installed pharaohs that ruled over a combined Egyptian-Kushite kingdom. By the 4th century, Kush was a shadow of its former self, and a dispute led the Axumite king, Ezana, to attack and possibly sack the capital of Meroe. The kingdom of Axum is possibly most famous for its enormous stelae, large decorated obelisk-like columns that had been built in the region for centuries. Hundreds of the monuments surround the city of Axum today in stelae fields, many of them marking the sites of underground burial chambers. The three largest of these, called the Royal Stelae, are the 79-foot-tall Ezana Stele, the fallen 108-foot-tall Great Stele, and the so-called Obelisk of Axum. The Axumites left a monument at Meroe and built another at Axum to document Ezana's victories, including that over the Kushites. The stone had writing on it in Ge'ez, Sabian, and Greek, thus representing a Rosetta Stone for these languages. King Ezana ruled from the 320s to 356. Ezana was the first Axumite king to embrace Christianity, being converted sometime between 325 and 328. He advocated for Christianity in his own kingdom, less than 2 decades after the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great converted. The conversion of Ethiopia was, according to tradition, the responsibility of a single man. Frumentius of Tyre, according to the Roman historian Tyrannius Rufinus, as children, Frumentius and his brother went with their uncle on a ship to the Red Sea, where the crew was attacked and killed by pirates, because don't all good stories involve pirates? And the boys taken captive. They were given to the king of Axum, Ezana's father, as slaves, but gained favor with the king before his death and were freed. Ezana's mother begged them that they stay, as Ezana was too young to rule and she needed help teaching him and managing the kingdom. When Ezana took the throne, Frumentius was an important advisor to the kingdom. Frumentius traveled to Alexandria to talk to the bishop there, who consecrated him bishop and promised to assist him in Axum's conversion. On his return, he baptized the king, and shortly after founded the original Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum, a rebuilt version of which still stands today. This became the site where Ethiopian emperors and later emperors of Abyssinia were crowned. The Ethiopian church enjoyed significant autonomy, but did follow the church in Alexandria to split from the Roman church following disagreements after the Council of Chalcedon in 451. The kingdom began minting its own currency during the reign of the king Indubis at the end of the 3rd century and continued minting coins for 400 years. They were one of the only ancient states in sub-Saharan Africa to mint their own currency and one of only 4 in the world who were minting gold coins at the time. Ezana began minting coins bearing the Christian cross, one of the earliest examples of the symbol on coins. The relative abundance of Axumite coins indicates that the kingdom had access to large supplies of gold, although it isn't certain what the kingdom's sources were. Axumite coins are also notably pure, and the supply of metals was closely controlled by the Axumite state. The kingdom's trade influence was great. Axumite coins have been found as far afield as India and Sri Lanka. The next major expansion was under King Caleb in the 6th century. Caleb was recognized as a Christian by the Byzantine Emperor Justin I, who sought Caleb's assistance in ending atrocities committed by the Himmerite king against Christians in modern-day Yemen. Caleb defeated and killed the Himmerite king, and the kingdom remained a tributary under the Axumite general Abraha and his son Masruk. Masruk's brother revolted with the help of the Sassanid Persian Empire, leading to a series of wars that were eventually won by the Persians. Munro Hay, a modern historian, cites these wars as one of the factors in the kingdom's collapse, thanks to the war's cost and loss of prestige. The kingdom's decline was caused by many factors. In addition to strength lost fighting the Persians, the kingdom may also have been affected by the plague of Justinian, probably the first appearance of bubonic plague, which killed millions in other parts of the world. In the early 7th century, the growing dominance of the Islamic Empire in the region isolated the country from other Christian states and largely ended their trading empire. But unlike Christian Europe, Axum was not on bad terms with its Islamic neighbors. Muhammad began preaching publicly in 610, but the ruling tribe of Mecca persecuted his followers. In the middle 610s, Muhammad advised his adherents, including his daughter, to seek refuge in Axum, in an episode known as the First Hijrah. The king of Axum is said to have refused a Meccan delegation which sought their return. There are different accounts of the effects of the exile, with some Islamic accounts suggesting that local Axumites embraced Islam, while some Ethiopian accounts instead suggest that some of the exiles converted to Christianity. Other ancient Christian kingdoms, such as Nobatia, Makuria, and Elodia, to the northeast, would eventually become Islamic, but Axum and its successors remained Christian. Despite their relationship with Islam, as early as 640, attacks were made at the port of Adulis, and the kingdom was forced to abandon the city of Axum and retreat inland. This marked the end of the kingdom's trading empire. However, the kingdom remained formidable and continued to expand south for several centuries. According to Ethiopian tradition, the kingdom was conquered by a Jewish queen named Judith in the 10th century, but contemporary scholars doubt whether she was really Jewish. Still, there is evidence of burned churches and rule by a female usurper in contemporary documents. Another factor in the kingdom's decline might have been climatological. With the collapse of the trading empire, there was over-farming on the terraced hillsides, which led to an erosion crisis that cascaded into a food shortage. And the favorable rainy season seems to become less reliable in the 9th and 10th centuries. The kingdom collapsed completely by 960, replaced by the kingdom ruled by the local Agawa people called the Zagwe dynasty, which lasted until 1270. It was overthrown by Yakuno Amlak, who claimed to be descended from a survivor of Judith's purge. Additionally, during this new Ethiopian empire, the Kebra Nagast, or Glory of Kings, was compiled and written and considered to be a reliable historical work by the Ethiopian Church. The work is a national epic describing the founding of Axum, containing the genealogy of the kings of Axum and the story of how the Ethiopians stopped worshipping the sun and moon to worship the Lord God of Israel. The bulk of the work tells the story of the biblical Queen of Sheba, whom it identifies as Makeda of Ethiopia. As told in the Bible, she visits King Solomon in Israel and is impressed by the wealth and knowledge there. but it then breaks from the biblical narrative by stating that she and Solomon conceived a child. The son, Menelik, visited his father as an adult, but refused to remain in Israel, so Solomon sent the firstborn children of the nation's elders with him to Ethiopia. Upset with their lot, these sons stole the Ark of the Covenant, and thanks to divine intervention, escaped Solomon's agents. It weaves together a narrative that the kings of Aksum and later Ethiopia were a single line descended from Solomon as far back as 900 BC, and the Ethiopian church still claims the Ark is in their possession at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. Modern scholarship on the work is lacking, but there is a possibly ancient Jewish population in Ethiopia known as the Beta Israel. Their origin remains uncertain, and even oral tradition suggests several possibilities. Many of them have in the modern era immigrated to Israel. In the 1930s, the Italian invasion of Ethiopia led to Italian soldiers taking one of the 3 royal stelae, the one called the Obelisk of Axum, in 5 pieces to Rome as a trophy, where it was erected under the orders of Benito Mussolini. It was kept there until its repatriation finally began in 2003. The pieces were so large that only the Antonov 124, a Russian plane, could carry it, among other difficulties. It has been reconstructed and now stands in its original home at Axum. The Solomonic dynasty was removed from power in 1974, and today the once great kingdom of Axum and its ruins are spread throughout several modern states. Its name is barely remembered, its modern influence is obscure. But in its time it was mighty. The Persian philosopher Mani, the founder of Manichaeism, described it as one of the 4 great powers of his time, with the others being Rome, Persia, and China. Of course, of that list, the kingdom of Axum is the one that is far least remembered today. But the important role that it played in the development of some of the world's great religions and its once powerful trading empire give it a unique role in history that deserves to be remembered. But there's still so much we don't know, many questions still unanswered, and the forgotten history of the kingdom of Axum reminds us of the enduring complexity of world politics and how much history there still is out there yet to be uncovered. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy, short snippets of forgotten history between 10 and 15 minutes long. And if you did enjoy, please go ahead and click that thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please write those in the comment section. I will be happy to personally respond. Be sure to follow The History Guy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and check out our merchandise on teespring.com. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you need to do is subscribe.